Hi, everybody. It's Kevin and Marina. We're so excited to be here with you. And we are talking about the interface between plants and humans. I love the interface word, Marina, because I feel like the interface always makes me think about digital interfaces. And it's really amazing how the interface in plants and humans is so complex. So we'll jump into that right after we play this clip, and we'll see you in a second. So Marina, on my side, that was it glitched like several times, and so hopefully our interface that you and I have today can be much more clear on plants and humans. But so good to see your face. I've been traveling pretty much nonstop. I feel like for multiple weeks. It is good to be back at my desk and at my home. The interface in our household is usually Savannah and I coordinated to work with things. And my wife is now gone on a conference trip over to Denver. So I'm having to take over some of the mom roles, and I'm struggling, Marina, mightily on my side. How have you been?
Wow. Yeah, I'm actually back from Boston. That's where I was over the long weekend. So I hear you on that. Yeah, it's hard to readjust. It takes like another day or two to get back into the rhythm and it's fun. The summer is upon us. It's June 1st. So at least it's feeling like higher energy and, things are moving and it's a nicer time to travel for sure than the winter.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So during this time when we have like plants blooming outside, yarrow is all over our backyard for Savannah and I right now. And we do have some silky lupin coming in, but it's just always so fun. Like whenever I see them, I think of my good friend Marina and being able to enjoy, looking at all of the plants and just enjoying the medicinal qualities of them just as well. But we're going to talk about why the interface is just it's so interwoven and it's so interesting between plants and humans and how it's different than drugs today. Marina, how would we like to start this conversation?
Actually, since you brought up drugs, this could be a great segue because our audience, is most familiar with drugs. So I threw in even the words in the description, pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So we're all taught that there's what the mechanism of the drug is, right? Mechanism of action. And that happens in the pharmacodynamics. Like what does it do in each organ system? What receptors does it activate? How does it interact? And all of that. So what does the drug do to the body, right? So we have that theoretical, um, you know, imagery in place of what it's supposed to do. And why it's less complex than a plant is because there's just one active ingredient that we're talking about as far as the mechanism of action. So that's our focus. So we're literally, just making this drug in order for there to be a very targeted mechanism. Now, the body, what it does is there's a pharmacokinetic process, what the body does to the drug now, right? Because it has to process this drug. That if we're doing oral administration or any other method of administration, we're talking about how does the drug enter the body, what happens to it, how does it reach its target, how does it get metabolized out of the body, how does it get cleared and eliminated. So all of those steps are going to be unique to the body, to the individual who's taking this drug. So those are concepts that we already know and are tried and tested and true because there's this individual effect that's going to happen. I'm sorry, I was just chopping some onion and it got I'm tearing right now. Okay. So essentially what is the onion doing to me? Yes, so the onion is eliciting a response right now. So that's exactly what happens, right? So drugs are one thing, and they're in a sense easier to deal with because your body is just recognizing that one active ingredient. However, what we don't really pay attention to, and I think we should, is that even in this drug that is targeted, there are these inactive excipients, there are these binders, there are these fillers, right? And they're supposed to be quote unquote inactive, but sometimes even those are like colorants and artificial ingredients that maybe you don't necessarily want to be ingesting, but because you are prescribed a drug, now you're having to ingest and break all of that down and hopefully metabolize that out of your system as well. And that's why I even see a big movement even in the over the counters, right? that there are some cleaner brands out there that just want you to get that active ingredient and want you to get like the least toxic fillers available, in order for you to just get the benefit of the drug, but not any of the potential drawbacks, even of the excipients.
Interesting. So you're seeing that now, Marina, that you're seeing like OTC preparations that are showing that they are more like pure and fast. How are they labeled right now? I have not seen this yet.
There's one brand I'm thinking of that they don't have everything, but they have like a cleaner Benadryl. They have, diphenhydramine. They have like other sort of common OTC things that, especially as parents, right, we want to give our kids the safest things, and we just don't want any of those pillars, binders, colorants, flavors. There's just a lot for the body to handle. Even when we think, okay, there's just a tiny amount, minute doses, they do add up from all this. Unfortunately, all these toxic things that we're exposed to on a daily basis in our environment, in our food, in our water, and in our medicine, quote unquote.
Wow. That is really interesting, and a subject definitely for another time with that interesting market play. I mean, seeing everything that is organic coming out on our shelves. And the other day, I saw something that was a microwavable bag that you were showing.
Yeah.
Like, please do not microwave plastics with food in them, and please rinse your food. I love that. But the interesting thing of rinsing your food off and talking about drugs and their excipients kind of plays back into our whole conversation of saying, here's the additive elements that we don't want to have here. But plants are different, right, Marina? I mean, the additive elements that plants are incorporating in the interface between plants and humans, it's very purposeful, like in the way that we're absorbing those things and both the kinetics and the dynamics of those elements going into our body, or the phytochemical soup, as my friend likes to call it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I resonate with. So the thing is, the plants are here for the plants. They're not necessarily here to serve us. They're not subservient to us. But we have this synergistic and symbiotic relationship, actually, just based on our, excretion of one gas and then breathing in the other gas. We really do, as humans and other animals, have this symbiotic cycle with the plants. So they're breathing life to us, and our carbon dioxide is going back to them. So we have this nice and neat recycling, rhythm going on. And so that's beautiful. And the plants are also filtering and creating good air for us. They're also cleaning up the soil. So a lot of the weeds that we talk about, they're actually making your environment healthier, and they're absorbing all those toxins and then processing them. And a lot of times they are more resilient because they're weeds. And that's why we actually use a lot of weeds as medicine, because they also help stimulate our organs of elimination. But what I want to say is some plants are going to have defense mechanisms, right? Because they don't want predators to come and eat them. They want to make it to their seeding cycle. They want to reproduce, and they want to survive, essentially, just like us. So every organism that's living here has their own survival mechanisms and defense mechanisms. And so plants will have theirs, and we will have ours. And their job is, again, to make it to seed so they could reproduce. So that's why sometimes you want to, actually all the time, you want to be wary, and you want to really know which plants you're eating and how it's best to prepare them and ingest them, or otherwise consume them either as food or medicine, depending on what these plants are doing to protect themselves. So everything that we talk about as far as like constituents and essential oils and lectins and all these like parts of the plant and at different stages of the plant's growth and the type of the plant, which family belongs to, this is how we can start to get the characteristics. Just like we have drug families, I always say this analogy, we have plant families. So anything within a specific kingdom, right, is a totally different organism, and everything within a plant family, they could be related and, either structurally or functionally or both. And so the taxonomy is always changing, and even the phylogeny is changing. But, we're learning new things, and this is how we start to categorize things. And this is how we see, okay, this has nutrients for us. Now, can we absorb all those nutrients, right? So that's the other question. So yes, this plant technically has these phytochemicals, these nutrients. Now, once somebody actually tries to ingest the plant, do we actually get those nutrients? That's the question. So that's the dynamic part of it.
Interesting. So, I love that you bring up the fact that plants are trying to protect themselves, from everything, just to make it through their phases and fulfill their purpose to go towards seeding. So when it comes to some of the things that plants are protecting, themselves from, including, grubs and herbivores and us, those mechanisms we're seeing, and then being able to lump them into categories, Marina, anything that's like a really helpful thing that you keep in your mind about these plants I need to do these things with to be able to disturb this or wash this away so that I can consume it successfully? And are there any really good references for us to be able to look toward and say, this is how I need to consume these plants? Because if I just literally pick it and eat it, it's going to cause this problem. But if I do this preparation element, it'll eliminate that altogether.
Yeah, great question. So this is doesn't have an easy answer. It really is like very individual. There are a few generalizations we can make as far as the taxonomy and where in the plant phylogeny things belong, but it really is a case by case basis. And it's also which part of the plant, right? Each part of the plant, and also at each cycle, part of the cycle of the plant, as we said, there's different things to look for. So there's, the plant growing from the root, right? The root forms first, then it goes to stem and to leaf. Then the energy goes up to the flower, then to the seed. So at every stage of the life, there's something different happening, and there's more like energy and resources at a certain part of the plant. So that's why we harvest at specific times. For example, the root, we will want like that prebiotic content right when it goes very cold, like after the first snow or before the first snow, somewhere around that time, like in autumn, is a great time to harvest your roots because they will store all the starches and the prebiotics there. And if you're looking to harvest the flower, it's different. For example, the mullein flower, it flowers like a few flowers a day sporadically. So it's going to be a very tedious and time consuming but intentional way for you to get those flowers when you understand what the cycle is like. And then how do we actually make sure that we are going to go through the plant's barriers and defenses? So again, if it's in the bean and legume family, that's a good example of anti-nutrients and lectins that it has, which are just the way that the plant coats itself and protects itself from, again, being digested very easily, because it wants to actually keep that seedling intact. And it has like a lot of the protective coatings and proteins and sort of sugars that it coats itself with. So there are great resources out there. I like Michael Pollan in Defense of Plants, and I like I forget his name off the top of my head, but there's a person who really talks a lot about lectins that you should look up. I'm going to put it in the show notes afterwards. I think his name is Dr. Gundry. So a lot of people say he's very radical, but some of what he says does make sense. So, with grains and legumes, this is something very common. Even with rice, we see that eating a lot of rice has some anti-nutrients depending on how you process the rice. And then it can leach your zinc because it takes zinc for you to go and break down some of what the rice has. So, and also rice, the problem with that is it can contain trace amount of arsenic. But basically, every food group, every specific plant has its own defenses that you should be aware of. Some plants are not edible in its raw form. Some plants, after cooking, for example, rice, we want to soak it. Actually, I soak it in apple cider vinegar for about 12 hours. Then I repeat. And then I boil it, or it's even better to steam and pressure cook the rice. So that way you actually get those anti-nutrients out by pre-soaking them. Same thing with legumes. That could be really good. Also, you want to know where the plant is stored. Like for peanuts, it's common for them to get moldy. So you want to just really make sure you're getting high quality foods. And just an example of like another another plant that I thought of. So the acorn, right, from the oak tree, you can't just eat it raw. But after a lot of processing, you can actually dry it up, grind, and cook that inside material of the acorn and make it into like a stew or a sort of almost like a grain type of thing or a dough type of thing. And if we were to eat it raw, it has so many tannins and it's so astringent that, you know, it would be really toxic and we would have gastric disturbance from that. But after some sort of processing, we get rid of those things and activate them, and then it's safe to eat. So we really have to understand how to deal with each plant individually. And then there's that individualized biochemical reaction inside your body, especially if you're ingesting it. There's so many levels, so many parts of your digestion that can be affected just by, you know, from your level of stress and presence and intention to your level of gastric juices, your bile production, your gallbladder function, all the way down to your small intestine and absorption, and then to your elimination and also processing in the liver. So there's a lot of individual factors.
Wow. Yeah, I just think that the entire world of food harvesting and us utilizing plants for a source of food just ends up becoming boiled down, no puns intended there, but ends up becoming boiled down to a point that we just don't understand the true complexities and nuances, you know, of these individual plants we're consuming, to know why do they have certain proteins or benefits, you know, inside of them at one stage or phase and not in another, and why are those kind of developments of these complex kind of chemical matrices happening. So I mean, I pulled up an example. There is a specific like plant defense that is a jasmonic acid that is released after something is wounded, like a plant is wounded, and then an enzyme is released from a protein to be able to prevent those herbivores from enjoying the consumption of it, which is so interesting, like to think of those mechanism kind of components of saying we're going to release a chemical now that is produced directly from harm happening to the individual plant. And then understanding, well, how do we go about then consuming those and making sure they're safe for our family and highly beneficial for everybody involved. That's great. Those resources are fantastic, Marina. I think the topic is super interesting. We need to jump back in and be able to see some of those examples, I think, live and living color. The one question I'm asking for, Lee, because I know you and I both love this plant slash weed, dandelions. Like dandelions are fairly, you can eat several components of dandelions, and they have their own mechanisms of defense. Anybody that's, you know, listening, you know that when you pick dandelions, there's this interesting milky substance that comes out of them, you know, to be able to defend them against, you know, next steps. And the other thing Savannah and I love is that you pick or pull a dandelion and they still will rapidly elevate themselves to seed production, that you have to get rid of them so they don't continue to populate your entire lawn. So any tidbits on dandelions before I let you go?
Yeah, actually, one of my students did a wonderful presentation. So first of all, you got to ID, make sure, again, identification is so important that you have the right plant. There's actually a few lookalikes that I wasn't aware of. There's like cat ears that looks almost exactly the same. And the way you can tell a difference part of the way is by knowing whether the stem has that milky sap or latex. And that latex actually is allergenic to some people. So some people, you know, will have a delayed type hypersensitivity. And the dandelion is part of the Asteraceae family, which is so vast and complex. And we actually have even ragweed is part of that family, and like a few other plants that people commonly have allergies to. So the mechanism of action there is that latex. So you got that, you know, head on. And otherwise, you know, it's a really wonderful plant, and pretty much everything except for the latex is used medicinally and as food. So it's a great plant, even though like we want to get rid of it, you can eat every single part of it. And the benefit, for example, to compare it to a diuretic. So the leaf will actually be potassium sparing, sort of a diuretic, because it adds in a lot of the nutrients and electrolytes that you would, urinate out. So it stimulates urination, but it also helps to replenish the electrolytes. So that's the wonderful thing about that. The leaves are also bitter, so they have that liver supporting effect, and then the root is used for that as well. And I did want to bring up one other plant family. So the brassica is often talked about, and that's one of the really highly beneficial plants for antioxidants. They, you know, give us precursors to a very highly powerful antioxidant that we produce internally, glutathione. It has that sulfur-rich group that it can donate to form cysteine, and then it goes on to form glutathione. So it's a great, wonderful food group. It's always recommended for just upping our health because of that and other nutrients that it has. It's a leafy green, right? And there's so many wonderful compounds. There's also estrogen regulating effects there as well. So it's a great plant, but how do we eat it safely and effectively is another question. So number one, it has vitamin K. So if you're on some medications, you have to make sure that you're aware of that interaction. It also is considered to have goitrogens. I mean, the level that you have to eat it is quite high for it to have that effect, that negative effect. However, I would still caution against like juicing it, or just be cautious and preferably just cook it really well and steam it. And that gets rid of any of those negative concerns about goitrogens and thyroid disease. And otherwise, it's such a wonderful and nutritious food group, but you really also have to be aware of how to get those benefits. And then just really quickly, something similar to that is spinach, right? Spinach is something we recommend all the time. We consider this a health food. We throw it on top of salads, but it actually has a lot of oxalates. So for people who have that problem of processing oxalates, which is a whole other topic too, we really have to be aware too of even healthy plants and what that's doing in our individual body.
Wow. I love it. I'm so excited about the resources you're going to send out there for me to read through it. I'm sure Savannah and I will nerd out on that here really soon. So thank you so much, Marina. Everybody that joined us, thank you so much. So excited to see all the folks that are popped up on there. And if you have any questions, head on over to the Herbalism channel and connect with Marina. Join our PH Ally through Bring. If you're a pharmacist or pharmacy technician or pharmacy student, we'd love to have you. Come on over and let's join the conversation there. Feel more than welcome to pop those conversations inside the live stream or inside of Marina's channel.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.